Hello. Oh, this is a very, very good mic. Should have had this one for the panel. So if you guys were in the panel 5 minutes ago, I was there. I'm Jim. I'll talk a little bit more about myself in a second. But hello everyone, hello UCC, hello UX Acceleration in Brussels 2024. Hello, hello, GM. Bonjour for my Flemish friends, and hello for my, bonjour for my Wallonians, and hello for my Flemish friends. I'm Jim. I'm here to talk about, not Catalyst, but Catalyst adjacent. Something that is about chain abstraction. It's called settlement, and it's not quite as sexy as intense, and not quite as, you know, the hot topic right now is solvers, but I would say it's something equally as important to ensure that we can offer this kind of beautiful chain abstraction utopia that we're all talking about. So I have the pleasure standing in front of you guys as one of the last keynotes of the day. You know, funny enough, when people tell me to pick the keynotes, they always say, pick the mornings, because that's where everyone is the most energetic, the most fired up. But I actually like the afternoon keynotes, because now it's my job to ensure that I'm really, really entertaining. Make sure no one's that sleepy, and they actually listen and learn about something that not everyone in this conference is going to talk about, which is settlement. So let us begin. First, I have to give an intro. I have to explain who I am, but I'll be really quick about that. So my name is Jim. I am a co-founder of Catalyst. I've been building crypto for 7 years now, mainly in product, and I love bridges. And what does that mean in practice? It means I read every blog post about bridges, which is pretty crazy, and I read every tweet about chain abstraction. I have a little notification on my Twitter to tell me about it, and so I like to think that I like bridges, and I like to think that I know a little bit about bridges, and I try to combine that with my product experience, and lo and behold, we have something called Catalyst. And what is Catalyst? Catalyst is effectively, in the simplest terms, a liquidity engine for all chains. And when we say all, I italicize it because it's kind of a loaded term, right? What is all? Is it 20 of the top chains? Is it the 500 chains we have right now? Or is it the millions of chains that I think we're going to have in the future? It's all the above, and more. And we've built a protocol that is lightweight and extensible enough to achieve that scale. If it's going to be 20, if it's going to be 500, or if it's going to be millions. And so it's a liquidity coordination layer that allows all these chains to facilitate value movement between one another, which is pretty cool. But before I talk more about Catalyst, before I talk a little bit more about settlement, I'm going to take a step back a little bit, right? Because I think some folks in this room, they come in here, they want to learn about UX acceleration, they want to learn about chain abstraction, but they probably don't know what it is or why we're doing it. In fact, I bet there are people in this room who think they know what chain abstraction is, but they don't know why we're doing it, right? And so, a little bit of a back pace. So, I'm going to start with a quote from the UX goat himself. We cannot have a UX conference without talking about Mr. Steve Jobs. And so, he said to start with the customer experience and work backwards towards the technology. And as I reflected on my 7 years working in crypto, I think we did it backwards. I think we built some really, really cool technology, but we've kind of exposed it raw to the users. We're letting the users just raw dog this very, very complicated technology. And as a result, it doesn't really look like the experience that people really want. And so as a result, the only people who are actually doing it are people that either work on the technology or they see the vision of what's trying to be, right? And so, what does it look like when you start with the technology? Well, let's say I want to do something really, really easy. Really easy. I want to go on Aave, and I want to earn yield on my USDC on Base. The only issue is that I don't have money on Base. Boo-hoo. So what do? So I go on Aave.com, I go on Base. Is that it? It says 0 on my account. I guess I have to go away. But luckily, I work in this industry, so I know I have to go on Google.com and go to Base Bridge. And so I Google Base Bridge. Lo and behold, on the first result, I have the Base Bridge. But the second result, I have some random game. Had I not known that this was the Base Bridge, I would have been playing this random card game. But luckily, since I spend all my waking moments in this job, I know to go to the Base Bridge. So I go to the Base Bridge. It's actually pretty easy, so props to the team for doing that. And I actually move my USDC from Ethereum onto Base. Only problem is that it's going to take 3 minutes. Fine, whatever, I'm going to run some errands or something. But finally, I bridge it. I can go back to Aave.com. At this point, I'm at 4 tabs. And I can now supply my USDC to Base. And so, at the end of the day, it took me 7 minutes and 4 different screens to do something that should be pretty easy. And so, what you realize is that people don't really care about chains. And for the folks that were part of our chain abstraction panel, I think that was one of the main takeaways of it, is that, sure, blockchains are awesome. They enable a lot of different benefits. But at the end of the day, especially in a world in which there are more chains and more rollups and more DA layers and more shared sequencing layers and more restaking layers, it gets really, really confusing for the user, even for myself. And so it's getting hard for me to really care about which one I'm using. But the thing is, that doesn't mean we should throw it all away, right? That doesn't mean we should go back to our Amazon and Google warlords. Now, blockchains are actually important to another group of people. They're important to developers. And developers choose which blockchain to build on for a myriad of reasons. It could be business reasons like other apps or liquidity, TVL. It could be more ethical or technical reasons like immutability and self-sovereignty. But at the end of the day, it is a choice that is being made because it is a value proposition that these chains are offering, and we should honor that. Just not to the users. And so we should create experiences for users instead. What if we were able to bridge directly onto Aave and earn yield on USDC, such that it took 1 screen and 1 minute, and whatever's happening underneath the hood, that would be the ideal experience for something that is so easy. You're earning yield on an asset that you already own. It just happens to be in a different distributed ledger than you thought it would be. And so we call all these technologies that are coming together to create this cake, which is the chain abstraction stack. And I didn't coin this. I'm not really that intelligent and creative with branding. But props to the, I think it was the Frontier team for doing this, the One Balance team. And so we can see here that at the top it's applications, offering these end user experiences that they want. Below that you have the permission layer, which has account abstraction with wallets that we see, as sponsors in this event. We have the solver layer, which other sponsors' events are building, these off-chain agents that perform actions on behalf of users. And then at the very bottom, we have the settlement layer, which really no one talks about, but that's actually where Catalyst lives, and what I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. And so all these really cool things that are being built and are sponsoring events to offer these end experiences for users are great, but I don't think we give enough love to the settlement layer and what that actually enables, because it is the bottom of this delicious cake. And so what is settlement? Settlement means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it is a way to interface with solvers such that their balances are effectively settled, right? They have money on different chains, they're offering different services to different users, and ultimately they want to be made whole, right? They want to be compensated for the risk and the liquidity that they're offering. And so ultimately they want money, they want liquidity on different chains. And that allows all these solvers to be very happy and continue to offer these services for users. So liquidity equals settlement, bit of a oversimplification, but sure, I'll say that for the sake of brevity. And so, like I mentioned, liquidity is no longer for users. And so, as someone designing liquidity protocols, we have to recognize that there's a paradigm shift where users are no longer interacting, or should no longer be interacting with liquidity protocols. They can, go to Uniswap and swap. That's certainly was helpful at the time that it came out, but is probably a bygone in the past soon. And instead, what we have is building for these other agents that allow these experiences to happen. And so this diagram is a little complicated. You can thank my designer for that. But it's effectively how Catalyst works in terms of its solver network. And so effectively, we have pools of assets that live on different chains. And then we have an underwriter, what we call our solver in the middle, that is effectively fulfilling those intents within 30 seconds. And so they're doing a fast swap between them. And then what happens underneath the surface is that they become settled via the Catalyst AMM, via these AMBs. It moves through the AMBs effectively. And that takes generally around 10 to 12 minutes. And so because the underwriter is fronting money within 30 seconds to the user, they know that they'll be paid by the Catalyst AMM, or reimbursed rather, within 10 to 12 minutes, which is something that allows them to continue offering these quick services for the end users. And so liquidity is solver facing. We're building for robots now, we're building for off-chain agents, we're building for institutions, right? And so in designing liquidity, when you think about it from a UX lens, our users as liquidity protocols or liquidity protocol designers are these kind of institutions that have completely different personas and completely different needs than users, right? And I'm not going to dive into this talk a little bit more about what that entails, but they effectively want money, right? Like they want to make money, they want to be able to receive money on different chains in order to continue offering the service for users such that they can make more money. And that is something that we're trying to give to them. And so there are a number of different projects in the space trying to solve settlement, trying to offer services, not services, but offer value to these solvers and these entities. Things like Across, they're doing really great with their settlement layer reimbursement system. Everclear, sorry, I couldn't find their logo with the name on it. They're doing some really great work on that as well. Orbiter Finance and of course Catalyst. We're all thinking about this paradigm shift of offering this liquidity services for these off-chain agents and what that looks like. So why is that important? Why do we spend so much time offering services for these solvers? It's because left unfettered, if there were no Catalyst, if there were no Across, no Everclear, no Orbiter, and we would let solvers do their thing and they rebalance on their own time or they use native bridges or whatever, the flows of solvers effectively looks like this. And this is taken from a Li-Fi research paper. It's a little complicated, so I simplified it with a little quote that I found within the research paper that I think elucidates the point a lot more quickly. It shows that in all the flows that you see within solver networks, in this case Across, a single solver often wins the majority of orders over $500, and a few agents win nearly all the order flow. So what does that mean? That means left unfettered, solvers will be a very, very centralized space for only institutions or organizations that have the capital requirements and the know-how to participate in services. Because if you think about it, being a solver is actually really, really hard. You have to be on a lot of different chains, you have to have capital on a lot of different chains, you have to have the legal licensing to be in all different chains, you have to be able to source liquidity from a lot of different venues, all to what? Earn 5 cents per transaction for these solver networks. So you really have to play a volume game here, right? This is not really a backyard hobbyist kind of thing, especially at scale. And so that is a tough kind of reality that we're looking into. And this slide shows the Uniswap X design, where effectively outlines a number of different kind of bottlenecks that you can see within the solver stack. And so for a filler here, which is what they call solvers, effectively, One is that effectively they're filling an RFQ, right? And so let's say they're filling like a ETH buy, so they're giving away their ETH and they're receiving USDC in return. They're actually receiving that USDC on the origin chain. I know you can't really tell, there's a lot of boxes and arrows. But effectively they're receiving that USDC on the origin chain. And so if they had ETH on the destination chain, now they have USDC on the origin chain, they're like, okay, like, but all my assets are on the destination chain. So why am I doing this? And so now they have to go on this journey to either find a way to go back to the destination chain or rebalance all their books such that they're okay being on this other chain, right? And so that is really tough for a number of reasons. And what are those number of reasons? The first thing is cross-chain inventory, like I talked about. These solvers are holding inventory of all these different things. And as a result, that's money that's locked up. And if you don't have a lot of money, well, tough shit, you can't be a solver, right? So that's tough. The second thing is price risk. Let's just leave at the Uniswap X example. You gave up your ETH, you're denominating all of your debts in ETH, your accounts in ETH. All of a sudden you have USDC, right? Well, what if ETH goes up? Now all of a sudden you lost money, right? So there's price risk on taking different assets at different values when you're solving these intents for users. And the last piece is bottleneck, right? If we go back to the Uniswap X example, you're stuck with this USDC. Maybe you have to move it on a native bridge, maybe you have to move it on some sort of fast swap bridge. You're either locking up your capital and it's taking a few hours to move it to a new chain, or you're going to be eating slippage trying to move it again. So that's more cost you're incurring, right? And so Catalyst actually makes life a lot easier for solvers by basically tackling those three issues that we just saw on the Uniswap X protocol. And so the first piece is no price risk. And so, as you remember from the other kind of graphic that I showed earlier, our underwriters are being paid in one asset, right, within the Catalyst protocol. And so if they're providing the ETH on a destination chain, they will be reimbursed ETH on a destination chain via the Catalyst AMM. And so price risk is not an issue for solvers on Catalyst. The second piece, as I alluded to, knows cross-chain inventory because they're also paid on the destination chain via this AMM, effectively. And so really no need to be worrying about having accounts on different chains. And the last piece is no bottleneck. And so if we saw in the previous example, it generally takes a few hours to be moving assets around the different chains, whether it's a native bridge, generally 4 hours, especially if it's optimistic, it adds to latency. For Catalyst, it takes generally around 15 minutes for reimbursement. And so what that means is if you're a solver and you get reimbursed within 15 minutes, instead of getting reimbursed within 4 hours, that's orders of magnitude more throughput that you can put on the existing capital, right? So no bottleneck on the existing capital. All that to be said, this lowers the complexity and lowers the capital requirements to run solvers, which means more solvers can be added to the system. And if more solvers can be added to the system, more solvers can be offering this glorious utopian cross-chain experience that I was talking about earlier with the Aave, right? And so that's effectively our mission now. Instead of building these user-facing liquidity protocols, making kind of peace with the chain abstraction stack, with the cake stack, realizing that liquidity protocols in the future should be designing for these off-chain agents and effectively ensuring that there are more off-chain agents by offering tools and offering the ability for these off-chain agents to thrive and have a more decentralized network of them. So that's basically kind of the new lens of viewing Catalyst within the chain abstraction kind of paradigm that we're evolving towards. Cool. I will stop there. That is Catalyst. Thank you. Do I have time for questions, or? Cool. Yeah, I have 5 minutes for questions if anyone has any. Hello, sir.
Why is the democratization of solvers such an important idea outside of just basically having faster execution and better order flow? Why is it a core ethos problem to crypto more so than just like a technical one?
Yeah, so for folks that didn't hear, this audience member that I do not know, he asked why is it important to have more democratization of solvers and more participation outside of just, you know, the business answers, which he gave were like better price execution, more liquidity, etc. I would say like there's probably like two core answers to that. The first piece is more on like the ethos side, and the second piece is more just on like call it like a availability side, right? And so on the ethos side, it's censorship resistance, right? Especially as you're expanding to different chains, you know, lots of new different chains. You're kind of on the fringes, right? You're moving from some Arbitrum Orbit L4 to some ZK Stack L5, right? You might have, you know, one solver there, right? And if they know that you're going to be moving size, if you're generating a lot of MEV effectively, they can hold that for ransom, right? And so that is something that is antithetical to effectively what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build open systems that are kind of fault-proof to an extent. And the second piece, which is the other side of the coin, is just from a UX perspective, like a availability perspective, right? If you're trying to move size, if you're trying to do anything on the fringes, there should be kind of like a bare minimum that you're offering, right, in terms of service. And so if you're trying to move this and you were given a guarantee from the front end that you're able to do this, but then you realize that the solver got lazy or just didn't want to do it anymore because there's only one solver, you kind of shed, you're out of luck effectively, right? And so that is really bad from a UX perspective. Any other questions? And I yield my time. Thank you guys.